try to take a step away from what you're accustomed to having and understanding that the resources may look very different when you're in another country or another culture.
Ripple Effects is brought to you by the National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange. The National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange is a project of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, designed to increase the participation of people with disabilities in international exchange between the United States and other countries, and supported in its implementation by Mobility International USA. I'm Justin Harford, a project coordinator with Mobility International USA and your host for Ripple Effects. We always say that an important part of preparing for international exchange is doing your research. Sometimes one excellent source of research might be a little too obviously the Office of Study Abroad and the Office of Disability Services. Sometimes the best way to get an idea of what you're getting yourself into is to speak with the people on the inside who work these programs every day. We decided to do just that for this podcast episode. Suzanne Sears and Tanisha Ellis worked together for a number of years at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, sending students with disabilities abroad in a variety of different programs. I had a chance to talk with them about some of the things that you should plan for when preparing to study abroad. And I think that the conversation is a great complement to our webinar on study abroad that we did last February, 2018, which is available in the related links section of our show notes. The most important thing to keep in mind, however, is that the one who can make the best choice for you is you. The best exchange experiences happen when we're courageous, and we base our decisions on what we know about ourselves, rather than what other people think about us. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and please don't hesitate to drop us a line at clearinghouse@miusa.org to share your thoughts. Today we're here with Tanisha Ellis and Suzanne Sears, who Tanisha is a professional in the international exchange world, and Suzanne is coming to us from the world of disability services. And I'm really happy to be able to speak with you guys today. I know that you guys had a great experience working together at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And I wanted to, and basically what happened, just kind of an update for our listeners and everybody. Just a couple months ago, we did a webinar on how to study abroad with a disability. We had a panel of people with disabilities who had gone abroad. But I just wanted to take the opportunity now on our podcast, now that I have a couple professionals, a couple insiders, let's say, to get a sense from you guys, from your side of it, what students should be thinking about. I wonder first you could maybe open, though, and just kind of tell us about a little kind of overview about your experience working together, how it was that you guys came to collaborate in this effort to get more disabled students going abroad.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, this is Suzanne Sears calling or speaking, and I would say when I was pretty early on in my career, one of the things that I felt that needed some additional addressing at the campus level was the collaboration between disability services and the study abroad offices. So maybe it was my energy being a entry-level, professional into the field of disability services. But I just took the initiative and reached out to the office and started a dialogue and a conversation about ways that we could actually collaborate together. So, and that's kind of where it began. But as we have worked with students on different needs throughout the following years, I was able to become acquainted with Tanisha in the office. We actually had a student in common we were working with that actually sort of started that relationship between the two of us specifically.
With the student that she's mentioning, one of the things was that I had them as an advisee, and previously you never really met the students who applied for a program, and I had some questions about the student's application. And
this was a wheelchair user, isn't that right?
Yes, but they never told me that in the application or the essay, and so the location that they wanted to attend was not accessible for the level or the weight of his chair.
He was using a power chair, right?
Yes. So it was really it wasn't, and the thing that caught me, I guess, was he said he didn't tell me because he was afraid we'd say no. It wasn't a no, it was we needed to find another location that was going to be accessible to the student. It took some time, and he had to change the term But with Susan's help, that's the thing. I needed to reach out to someone who could kind of tell me what I needed to do, because I had never worked with students with disabilities before.
So what was it like for you when you reached out to Suzanne, Tanisha, and kind of had that support?
Because in all honesty, I had no idea what questions to even ask. I had worked maybe 2 years in the field before this. Now I've been there 7, almost 8 years. And I had no, prior to, I had no students who had asked this question. Or I didn't know much about ADA rules at all. And so I had a lot to read up on it. And she was kind of an encyclopedia for me. What I could and could not say. Because the vocabulary was different too. I didn't know how I could talk to a student and not make them feel like, I guess, alienated in any way. And so that was like the biggest thing for me, was the vocabulary when I talked to the student. And the student was very open. Like he told me things that I'm like, I have no idea what that means. I need to talk to Susan. So it was, I think the very first student I worked with was, I don't say it easy, because like it just kept escalating. After one student went, everybody wanted to go. So it was really good to be able to be connected with disability services.
Nice. Yeah, I imagine probably the word started spreading maybe too among the other students. I wonder, so anyway, I guess getting back to the topic though, guys, I wonder if we could start though by saying, from the point of view of the student. So if I'm a student with disabilities and I'm listening to this and I've maybe heard the webinar at our website, and now I'm kind of thinking, okay, what are some other things that I should be knowing? I mean, what is the first thing, if I'm a disabled student and I've been maybe going to college for a couple years now, I'm pretty familiar with things on my home campus, and now I want to study abroad. And so what is the first thing, what should I expect as I'm going through this process and working with study abroad and disability services?
Well, one of the big things is every student is allowed to come in the office, ask questions about any program that they might be interested in. And that's kind of the first step. Generally, when I advise, I don't allow students to pick their first choice when they come right in, because it's usually like, oh, my friend said this, but how is this going to fit you? So it's more trying to fit a program that's going to work. But at the same time, with disability services, they know how far a student can achieve in a semester. For example, if like there's only cobblestone streets and there is no access to buildings outside of going up steps. I should go back to say that the University of Illinois is like one of the top disability services campuses in the United States. So a lot of accessibility that the students thought would be the same on campus would not be abroad. So it's the first initial, the student is the one that initiates this conversation. And then with their permission, of course, I would talk to Susan at the time with disability services to like kind of give a background of the program, what expectations the student might have, and if at all possible, I would do a site visit at that location too, just to like do a kind of checklist of what is available, what's not available. Do they need a larger battery? Those are the things that we discuss. And I was in charge of that at Illinois for a couple of years.
And I think Tanisha's point about, understanding what your options are, one of the things that we encourage students to do, and this is the same for all students wanting to study abroad, but really what are the essential requirements of your study abroad experience? Is it a more culturally based program, or are you going to be taking actual coursework at a host university? And so understanding what is going to be expected of you when you choose or select a particular program. And then based off of that information, we start a dialogue and a conversation about what kinds of reasonable accommodations are going to be needed based on the essential requirements or the things that you're going to be responsible for completing for that given study abroad program. And so that's kind of a good starting point. And as Tanisha said, you have to be the one to initiate that discussion or conversation.
And although the accessibility part is really important, my office is more looking at what is your major, what is your minor, not just choosing a location. Like if you're not a math major, but this program fits you, it's not going to be a good fit. You're not going to have the best time, and you're not going to pass your classes.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think What?
One thing I got the sense of though is so like people. I know Tanisha, you mentioned that people go overseas and not they expect a similar level of accessibility. They don't get it, and in Suzanne, it seemed like you were kind of touching on that point. I'm kind of curious if you guys have any examples of any kinds of accommodations, either structural or policy wise, that maybe a student might have on their home campus that they wouldn't have abroad. I mean, of course, there's the obvious ones that there's cobblestone streets sometimes overseas, but are there any other ones that maybe students that maybe that wouldn't be so obvious based on the conversation so far?
I think looking at the general, like student service supports at a given institution might be different based on different cultural factors, the way we socially construct disability within a culture. And so not to expect that that another institution in another country is going to have like the level of maybe certain kinds of individual counseling services, things of that nature.
Or if they have a breathing issue, for example,
Yes.
Peru probably would not be the best place to go. And I mentioned that because I'm coming from Illinois, where it's completely flat, and now I live in Colorado, and it took me several months to be able to walk and breathe at the same time.
Yeah, good point. So a lot of structural stuff. I was actually giving a talk at some universities a couple weeks ago in Mexico, and there was an interesting. I noticed from that research. I mean, like kind of like what you were saying, Suzanne. Sometimes mental health services aren't really as much. So even you can have universities that are thinking a lot about services for blind people or deaf people, but then they're not quite so much there when it comes to, for example, things like mental health.
Right. Yes.
So that could be something to take into account.
I think one of the strengths in terms of mine and Tanisha's collaboration in the past is the fact that the study abroad advisors are very well versed in terms of the nuances and the nature of the programs in which we offer to the U of I students. That has been a tremendous part of how we are able to successfully work together, that they know the ins and outs of the culture and the landscape of the country, as Tanisha said, like the environmental factors that can impact students as well when they're abroad.
Totally. And I mean, it seems like what I'm getting here too is students, there's definitely a lot of need for research, and it seems like study abroad advisors, the DS office can be a great thing. And I'm kind of curious, do you think that there's anything else that a student looking at a study abroad opportunity might want to research, so that when they come in, they're not just saying, oh, I want to go to Peru because my friend said it's really great, or so that they are informed or have kind of a big idea of what the advisor is going to tell them about the accommodations overseas?
And I was wondering, the class that you had offered every semester was helping students choose an aid, the accessibility class. What was that called? And I liked going into that one and talking to students about the possibilities of going abroad.
So currently my role within Disability Services, I'm the director of our residential program called Beckwith Residential Support Services, and we can accommodate up to 26 residents, currently enrolled U of I students with significant physical disabilities. And part of the Beckwith program involves a transitional disability management planning class that students within our program can take to we look at, how to live independently, manage and successfully manage your personal assistance. But we also talk widely about student engagement. And part of the student engagement and the U of I experiences study abroad. And so we've actually had Tanisha come in when she was here on our campus and talk about study abroad and opportunities, as well as how do you, effectively navigate the process of research and preparing to travel abroad if that's an aspiration of yours to do before you graduate. And so that's one way that we've collaborated as well in the past.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a lot of research that students can do, right? Like internet searching, checking with Mobility International. There's sometimes resources, even countries will publish resources on their website, on university websites, you'll see articles, blogs, people talking about access in different forms. So lots of definitely different ways that people can do that. What do you think is the top thing that that a disabled student should know before
I guess one of
taking
the
on this challenge?
One of the big things is that also at Illinois, students had to, if they needed an aid, they chose their own aid from, I guess, a pool of students that are available, either physical therapists on their own right, but they had to be trained before they actually could go about with the student as well.
I think,
I don't know, Susie. Go ahead.
right. And one of the things within, for instance, of a student within our residential program, and we've had a number over the years do study abroad, they have access to a lift system in their rooms within our residential program, and we try to educate and inform the student with the disability as well as the student PA that may be accompanying that student abroad that you may not have access to such equipment. So when you do transfers from like bed to chair, for instance, or chair to bed to the restroom, those kinds of things, what is that going to look like, and what will that involve to safely help in that capacity with the activities of daily living assistance without the possibility of having that kind of auxiliary aid equipment with transferring. So we look, try to take a step away from what you're accustomed to having and understanding that the resources may look very different when you're in another country or another culture.
That's a really great point. Yeah, that's just basically, it's so easy for us as people with disabilities, as service providers on campuses in the U.S. to get so used to, the way I get my books is I take them to the DS office and they digitalize them, or the way that you transfer is like what you were saying, but sometimes we can kind of forget that there's other ways of doing it. So stepping back, looking at what are your accommodations that you use now, what are the ones you can take overseas and the ones that you can't, and what are the alternatives for that last category?
Most certainly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys, both of you, so much. This has been really appreciated, and I know that our listeners are really going to appreciate it, and we will be in touch, I hope. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And that concludes Ripple Effects, Travelers with Disabilities Abroad. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider subscribing and sharing with your friends. If you really feel positively about us, we would appreciate it if you would leave us a review on iTunes. All of those things will help us get the word out to more people. See you next time.